aren't here to hear me, y'all are here to hear the meat of the conversation. So you did a really good job, David. Just thank y'all so much for coming out. Thanks for being leaders in the conservative movement here in Arkansas. As you guys know, and you wouldn't be here, it's imperative that y'all stay informed, that we all stay informed and work together for our common cause. So Michael, if you want to go ahead and get to the meat of the situation, come on
Sure,
down.
thanks. Thanks to Elizabeth and AFP and the Events Arkansas Institute for making this possible. Thanks to all of you for coming here. I got to correct one thing though. The CATO Institute is a libertarian think tank. Okay. And what that means is we were against Obamacare when it was called Romneycare. Most people, whose name I will not mention, supported it. We were against it even way back then.
I think you'll find a lot of libertarians sitting in this room.
Great. Okay, great. So what I want to talk to you about today is Obamacare, how it's not set in stone, how it's still vulnerable to being repealed, and how states can make that happen. States can force Congress to reopen the law. I can't guarantee you that they're going to repeal it, but you can put a lot of pressure on Congress to do that by doing two main things. One, not implementing a health insurance exchange, and two, not expanding the Medicaid program in any way, shape, or form. And the way that is going to put pressure on Congress to reopen the law is it's going to expose to people the full cost of this law. And they're going to demand that Congress reopen it. Now, come on in. I could probably stand someplace other than right in front of the door. Yeah. So I'm continually surprised when I go around the country talking about this law to find that there are still people who think that states have to implement it. They don't. They don't have to implement a single part of this law. The Supreme Court, that was the only part of their ruling in NFIB v. Civilians they actually got right, where they said Congress cannot force states to do anything. They cannot require states to create a health insurance exchange. They cannot require states to expand their Medicaid programs. These are optional. So don't let anyone tell you that the state has to do this. For that matter, don't let anyone tell you that this is the law of the land. This is a democracy, and the people get to decide what the laws are. And when they say it's the law of the land, they're basically telling you, sit down and shut up, I don't want to hear from you anymore. So here's how, the way that stopping these things puts pressure on Congress to reopen the law. It works in a couple of ways. One of them is that the health insurance exchanges contain lots of, what's an exchange? To me, a health insurance exchange is when I give an insurance company money and they give me health insurance. That's not what the government has in mind. What the government has in mind is an exchange is a government bureaucracy through which all the magic of Obamacare is supposed to happen. They're going to be enforcing the regulations, they're going to be helping to enforce the individual mandate, and they're going to be doling out nationwide $1 trillion or so of subsidies to private health insurance. All of which is going to add to the deficit, by the way. But the purpose of those subsidies is to hide from people the full cost of those regulations and the individual mandate. Because if people had to pay those costs themselves, they would revolt. They would demand that Congress reopen the law. And supporters of the law know this. They know that the law cannot survive if people are seeing the full cost. Now, there are probably some folks around here who, no, I guess not. I guess we're all like me in high school with Medicare catastrophic act of 1988 was passed. But if you're a very precocious high schooler, you remember what happened. Does anyone remember what happened after that law passed? Congress passed this law to provide additional Medicare benefits to Medicare enrollees, and they said that Medicare enrollees have to pay the cost. They imposed a tax on Medicare enrollees. So they saw the full cost of what the government was offering them, and they rebelled. And 1 year after President Reagan signed that into law, President Bush repealed the law because of the backlash from the sticker shock that came with Medicare as a result of the Medicare catastrophic act. Supporters of Obamacare know that if those subsidies aren't available in the health insurance exchanges, people see the full cost of this law, they're going to demand that Congress reopen it. If consumers will, employers will, insurance companies will. The insurance companies especially, because they know that when the healthy people see those incredibly expensive premiums, they're going to be the first ones to opt out. And under the law's community rating price controls, that increases the premiums for everybody in the pool. More healthy people will leave the pool, premiums go higher, and the whole thing collapses. Insurance companies know that is a threat to their existence. The reason not creating an exchange is important is that those subsidies are authorized only if the state creates its own exchange. If the state opts to let the federal government do it, no subsidies. That's what the law says. The law is absolutely clear on this point. Just had a journal article released with the co-author this week that makes that point abundantly clear. Congress meant to do this. It wasn't a glitch. It was intentional. The law is clear. No subsidies. So what you're thinking now is great. Well, Arkansas isn't creating an exchange itself. We're doing this weird partnership exchange thing, which is something different. So Congress must be repealing, and 34 states have said they're not going to create their own exchange. They're going to let the federal government do it. So with 2/3 of the states saying no to an exchange, Congress must be debating repeal right now, right? Not quite. Not quite, and the reason is that the Obama administration, despite the clear language of the law, and in spite of congressional intent, is offering those subsidies in exchanges that the federal government is running. That means that they're really preparing to spend, without congressional authorization, over the next 10 years, $600 billion to prop up this law, with zero congressional authorization. That's more than $500 billion. So we got to stop that too, unfortunately. But there is a way to do that. There are a couple of ways to do that. For example, one of those ways is those subsidies are what triggers, actually tax credits are. 1/4 of the money that we're talking about when I say subsidies is tax credits, actual tax reduction. The other 3/4 is government spending. But it's the tax credit part that triggers the penalties against employers under Obamacare's employer mandate. The employer mandate says if you have more than 50 workers, you have to offer them a minimum amount of coverage, or we're going to penalize you $2,000 per employee. The way it works out is if you've got 100 employees, that's a penalty of $140,000 per year. Obamacare ties those penalties to the tax credits. So by not creating a health insurance exchange, under the statute that Congress passed and President Obama signed, you're also exempting every employer in Arkansas from that $2,000 per worker tax. And when the Obama administration offers those subsidies and exchanges without congressional authorization, it's also taxing Arkansas employers without congressional authorization. When you look at the 34 states that have been doing that, and the other 33 states that haven't created exchanges, when you look at all of them, this is a bigger example, a more sweeping example of taxation without representation than the Stamp Act was. So those employers have standing to challenge this law. And Oklahoma, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, in the state's capacity as an employer, has done it. Every employer in Arkansas with more than 50 employees can challenge that law. So if you know any of them, if you know any employers that fit that profile and they'd like to do that, I know some attorneys who'd like to speak to them. There are also about 130,000 individuals in this state who, because Arkansas did not create its own exchange, are exempt from the individual mandate. But because the Obama administration is offering those subsidies through a federal exchange, again without congressional authorization, those folks are going to be taxed as well without congressional authorization. It's a weird, complicated thing. I'd love to explain it to you if you're interested. But we're talking about, families of 4 making between $24,000 and $96,000 a year are going to be hit with taxes that Congress never authorized. So they also would have standing to challenge the Obama administration's illegal taxes. But the legislature can also block those illegal taxes with a law that's already been introduced in Ohio and Missouri that would just carry out Congress's intent. It would block those subsidies in the state. Because the state, through its power to license insurance plans, as it happens, has the power to block those subsidies and exempt employers from that mandate and those taxes, and thereby put pressure on Congress to reopen this law. So that's the exchange piece. It should be a little simpler. It should be as simple as not creating exchanges. Unfortunately, it looks like unless a wave of respect for the rule of law washes over the Obama administration, we're going to have to.
Let's take a vote on that.
We're going to have to get them to respect the Constitution and the rule of law through one of these measures. But if Oklahoma succeeds or any other plaintiff bringing suit against these illegal taxes succeeds, then Congress is going to start debating repeal again, because they just can't not. And supporters of the law admit this. And that's why supporters of the law they're in complete denial about this feature of the law and how unlawful are all these, this $500 billion in subsidies and taxes that the Obama administration saw. So that's the exchange part.